So ladies, gentlemen, fellow Gothamites out there, welcome back to my recap, review, and breakdown for The Penguin Episode 2, titled Inside Man. It doesn't exactly go according to plan, with Oz's plan for the inside man, if you will, being VT. As Oz says, you gotta think on your feet. We also have Sofia's storyline very much so cooking along, certain alliances being made, but I'm gonna shut up. We're gonna get right into the recap and review of the episode. If you go on to enjoy this video, I would deeply appreciate it if you gave it a like, consider sharing it, and of course, subscribe for more breakdowns on the Penguin just like this, and any brand new news on that of Matt Reeves's Batverse. Now, right at the beginning, I don't know how many of you fanboyed or fangirled out about this one, but it picks up in Arkham. But the thing is, it turned out to be a dream sequence, but I do want to say, don't worry if you're like, oh, is this all we're going to get out of Arkham? No. But what I will say is that when we heard the haunting sounds of Arkham's crazy inmates, with Sofia being taunted as the hangman while she's being taken by Julian Rush, played by Theo Rossi, into that interview room, I do love that kind of creepiness. It is, as Matt Reeves said, I know I always bring this up in my other Batman videos, but it is a haunted house. I loved, like, feeling that sense of dread, imagining what it's like to be an inmate in there. But notice that red light above the Arkham door. That was the first clue we got for the type of therapy that Sofia Falcone is in. And she's having a visit from her brother Alberto. And of course, he's missing a finger, and he gets shot by a mysterious figure, which I suppose represents that Sofia technically doesn't know who exactly did the crime, so she's still very much so out for vengeance this episode, despite knowing that the sights are set on the Maronis. And when she comes to, Sofia was in that therapy session. I can't remember what type of, like, therapy that is, like the red light kind of therapy that Dr. Julian Rush is doing, but you can tell how much Arkham still haunts her, as well as now, obviously, the loss of her brother. Not to mention, you know, the scenes that we saw later on in the episode demonstrating this. When she wakes up, we see her gasping for air, like reaching for her neck as if something was trapped around it, to the point of where she even leaves bloody marks behind from her fingernails embedding into her skin, as if she was literally having a dream about being suffocated, or rather, hanged. All I want to say now is Kristen Milioti, man. I know I've gushed over her a lot already, and I'm probably going to do that 1,000 more times, but this character has so much going on, just like Oz, which is why I say that her character is just as compelling as I would say Oswald Cobb is. Even in acting, as I've briefly mentioned before, I feel like she, dare I say it, matches Colin Farrell. She's just absolutely great. But back to Dr. Julian Rush here, it's interesting to note that, you know, he's still with her in present day and involved with Sofia, because, you know, we can't forget from the trailers, he was in Arkham with Sofia. So it's fascinating to see that they've continued to see each other. And I found it interesting as well. I was wondering, oh, is there more to what he was saying to Sofia when he was calming her down, telling her to ground herself in the reality of the room? But the picture on that wall looked pretty damn creepy. It's by the artist known as Rosario Oliva, and it's called Scream Louder, Scream Twice, and it's meant to be a visual representation of one of the most ferocious moods, the difficulty of communicating the help you need, a silent scream that breaks the soul in two, which I would definitely say is very much so representative of Sofia's storyline moving forward, and with regards to the context you learn in the past. I can't say too much here, but when you get a bit more knowledge about everything she's gone through, as I've been teasing ever since episode 1, I would say that that visual representation of that painting, or that charcoal drawing rather, probably sums up how Sofia felt with her journey going into Arkham and throughout Arkham, and I guess, yeah, even pertaining to present day with what she's enduring even right now. But next up, we're back with Oz. Now, after the events of last episode and where Oz pinned Alberto's death on the Maronis, yeah, let's just say that Salvatore Maroni isn't too happy with being put into that position of taking the fall of what Oz did without him being in on it. Of course, though, Oz is trying to sell it as though he's done a favor to Sal, and in a weird way, he kind of has, because it might have even been the Maroni's ambition anyway to be put back onto the map, of course, with the power vacuum that was caused with Carmine's death. Sal does obviously threaten to drop Oz's names to the Falcones right now and stop the war that Oz has brought on his family, but Oz feels fairly confident that he wouldn't do that because he's already been wearing the ring around Blackgate, so no matter what way you look at it, that does make Sal look pretty complicit in the plan, so perhaps he should just lean in on it, right? And so that's where Oz presents that same opportunity. The Falcones are still licking their wounds, they're moving the drops business down into Robbinsville, and there's like a prime opportunity here to steal the product. But this time in Blackgate, we're joined by more than just Sal there. He has some of his men and his wife, Nadia Maroney, and Nadia is played by Shore Adashlu, and, you know, she's a fantastic actor. I loved her, I would say most recently, and what I've seen is Amazon Prime's The Expanse. Shout out to anyone who's watched that show. She was amazing in that, but she really is fitting for like a crime boss's wife. And if you think about it, Nadia Maroney's probably had such a huge part to play in the Maroney crime family for the past 20 years, just in terms of being the face of it, Salvatore Maroney's right hand and voice during Sal's time in Blackgate. You can tell that he listens to her and takes her advice because she does say to him about Penguin's plan and that this man is a dog, but a dog can be made submissive. So she does know a thing or two about how to play the game, and I like seeing that, and I hope to see that more and more throughout the series. So Sal agrees to claim Alberto, and Oz has to make good on the drops that he promised that are being transported. This is where we get a little bit of a heist in the intro to this episode. Oz oversees the move using a FEMA truck for cover with the drops sitting inside emergency water barrels. Everything seems like, okay, should go smooth and simple. But the thing is, this is when Johnny Vitti arrives and tells Oz that he is meant to ride on the truck with the product, not the follow car, which is, isn't ideal, as Oz gave Maroney's men full clearance to spill plenty of blood on that particular vehicle. And as expected, this does get pretty messy. Oz has to take matters into his own hands when the Maroney strike, and here we get a nice little piece of action. One of Maroney's men, Avad, gets shot, and he obviously comes into play later on in the episode in something that could have gone disastrously for Penguin if it went the other way. But overall, quite a brilliant intro to this episode, which just marks the gang war igniting into something much bigger, because now, not only did a car get sent in with Alberto's body in it saying payback, right? I mean, not that it was the Maroneys anyway, but now they've hit one of their vehicles, stealing the entire drops that they recovered after the floods. So back at the Falcone's mansion, or frickin' palace, I guess you could call it, Oz is in the meeting room arguing with VT, who really isn't happy since it was Oz's operation, but ultimately they're just pointing the finger at each other. Sofia comes in saying that the money is the least of their concerns, and it's kind of true. Like, it feels like she is the only one who's got her head screwed on straight. Like, nobody else seemed to be asking questions about an inside man at this point. She says that they can always get more money, and the main thing to address is that the Maroney family humiliated the Falcone family by killing Alberto, and why aren't their killers strung up across the city? Famous words from the supposed hangman killer there. But Sofia concludes that the Maroneys weren't working alone, and that they must have had someone on the inside. And so this is where we get introduced to Luca Falcone, Carmine's brother, who actually slaps VT on the wrist for disrespecting Sofia. And with Luca asking Sofia to stay behind, and just his introduction and involvement in this episode is really just a whole other catalyst for Sofia's storyline this season that propels her into her own larger ambition. But to be fair, like, if she didn't go and do what she's about to do next with tracking down, or trying to track down, the inside man, would Luca and VT or anyone have put two brain cells together to think, well, how did they know our route? How did they know about, the drops in the FEMA truck? Like, we have another rat on the inside, which kind of makes me think of some criticism that one of my friends said, which I actually felt was kind of valid. One thing that probably should have been in the Penguin series, and sure, maybe they might get round to doing this, I'm not sure, but you would have thought it would have been included in the early episodes, if anything, and that is how, given that this is barely any time after Carmine Falcone's death, that there hasn't really been any conversation surrounding the fact that he was a rat and the repercussions of that. And you may be like, okay, well, they're just moving on. I get that, but at the same time, wouldn't some of the other underbosses be thinking, well, if Carmine was a rat, who else maybe knew that he ratted out to the police 20 years ago? There might have been someone in on it. There might be pointing fingers within that of the family. Maybe Luca knew about it because he was his brother. You know what I mean? Just like the whole politics within that of the crime family. And I'm not saying that the show isn't without its, in crime family politics, because we're literally getting into that within episode 2 and throughout the series. But I do feel like there is a little bit of a missed opportunity, and I agree with my friend there by saying that it would have been cool to see that being addressed, because I'm sure that even the other gangs of Gotham have no respect for the Falcone crime family, knowing that Falcone was a rat. They're probably questioning who else was a rat in the family, and that in of itself would probably lead other gangs to rise up, if not collaborate, against the Falcones. And if anything, in a lot of crime or gang situations, it would fall back on the family. Like, some of the other underbosses would want to take out even the son and daughter of Carmine Falcone because he was a rat. Do you see what I'm getting at? Any kind of addressing of that would be cool. And meanwhile, Oz is trying to appeal to that side of her, saying that he believes her theory of a rat being on the inside and that it should be her in there calling the shots, adding to her suspicions that none of them like or care about her and think that she's crazy. But he also mentions that she does have a card to play. He's trying to remind her about Alberto's new shipment, the new drug that she was in on with her brother, and how this could actually show the power she's got if that turns out to be something successful. Now, a few scenes after this, just to link something a little bit later, while Sofia is riding in the car on the way to see that detective, we get a cool little report over the Gotham City radio, which gives us some really interesting insight into the state of Gotham. So they say that since the seawall collapsed, crime has spiked all over Gotham, going up by a huge 42%, which, is absolutely nuts, considering Bruce said at the beginning of the Batman, on his way back to the Batcave, that murder, robberies, and assault were already up 2 years later despite his involvement. So again, imagine how busy Batman is during the time of this show, adding a massive 42% on top of that. The radio also mentions that they're letting psychos out of Arkham right now, the Hangman. And the other radio host says that, well, she was technically exonerated, with the other guy saying that he doesn't care and he's convinced that she's a serial killer, having killed 7 women, and that's just the ones that they know about. Now, before somebody comments it, he did say psychos, as in plural, so perhaps more psychos than just Sofia leaving Arkham. Some of you may be thinking that's possible, but I really do think it was just the way the radio host was wording it, rather than actually letting multiple people out of Arkham. But I can't gloss over the detail in where we've now learned for a fact that the reason Sofia Falcone got out of Arkham 10 years later in 2022 is because she was exonerated, which is very intriguing, suggesting that she wasn't actually guilty of committing the Hangman killings after all. So the question is to you guys, did Sofia get exonerated falsely, so she is still maybe guilty of the Hangman killings? Or, if not Sofia, then who is responsible for the Hangman killings? But back to where Sofia was on her way to. She was on her way to find a detective in the bar who was looking for drops. Love the line of the bartender saying to the detective with regards to not having drops, take it up with the Riddler. He does remind me of what Detective Bullock could perhaps be like in this Matt Reeves iteration of the Batman universe. His appearance seems fitting. We learn that he actually used to work for Carmine. Sofia wants to use him to sniff out the snake in the grass, the rat, the insider of whom told the Maronis about the transport heading to Robbinsville. Oz then invites Eve Carlo and the girls around, and Vic gets introduced to Rox as the guy who effed up the tacos order, which again reminds me of how their whole dynamic, the dry humor in this show continues to grow with more little gems here and there like this. And we even get a glimpse of Vic's own personal storyline in this moment. He peeps a text from Graciela asking where he is and if he's okay. So that is obviously someone Vic knows and will get linked to more. I think it's in next episode. Now, when talking to Vic, Rox mentions that her cousin lived over in Crown Point, and she says it's like a no man's land or something, as they lost everything, which is obviously a little kind of reference / Easter egg to No Man's Land from the Batman comics. And it kind of does pertain to it as well. Like, I'm not quite saying Gotham right now is like Gotham in No Man's Land, but it does have aspects of the lawless kind of wasteland that Gotham was when it was not really declared a part of the United States anymore. But this also adds a little bit more depth as to why he's probably pretty much lost everything too, and that's why, if you're still wondering, he's still sticking around with Oz. Now, Eve talks with Oz and confronts him, saying that she knows that he killed Alberto and why he needed her alibi, thus putting her goals at risk. And he tries to say, and this gives us a couple of clues of things that might come to fruition, that she's bet on the right horse and there's nothing to be afraid of. She'll share in the spoils of his new empire, and he even says that he's going to open up a new club, swankier than the Iceberg Lounge, with her goals as entertainment. Now, I actually really do hope that we get to see that happen in the Batman Part 2, because obviously Oz will be Kingpin by then, spoiler alert, but like, this is about his rise to Kingpin status in Gotham. So will we see a new club in the Batman 2 that Oz is in charge of, or is his base of operations maybe, just maybe, an upgraded Iceberg Lounge? Before we get to the funeral though, Oz is called by the landlord he pays to keep an eye on his mum, just in case her dementia ever leads to a dangerous situation, and it turns out that she was wandering across the street without a coat, thinking that it was Sunday. So the landlord thinks her dementia is getting much worse and that maybe she needs permanent care, but you can tell that that is the last thing that Oz wants to do to her. Now, this is where we get that scene from the trailers and where they start dancing, where she's barely able to stand up, and Oz reassures his mum that he's working on getting her a better life. And so once again in this moment, you can truly see how close they are, for then Francis to come out with another side of that spectrum and say, if my son's nothing, then what am I? And it's just that contrast that we see with Francis that just made me think, like, damn, that must cut so deep for Oz, yet he's probably used to hearing this his whole life. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not excusing that, but it doesn't mean at the same time that she doesn't love or care greatly about him. It's just like, as Lauren LeFranc said, Francis is a tough-as-nails broad, and through their relationship, you can see how that deeper-rooted issue of Oz wanting to be loved and revered and respected among all kinds of other things stems from his mother, which leads me to the actual next scene in where those last lines between them in this episode really got me. Because when Vic says the funeral is starting, Francis tells him to go, and we hear her say Oswald as he's going through the door. And he says, like, without him saying what, or, you know, what is it, Mum? He just already knows what she's about to say. And he replies with a sad look on his face saying, I know, Ma, I won't let you down. That sums it all up right there. And so this is where we get the funeral and the wake of Alberto Falcone. And things certainly get spicy at this part of the episode. I mean, as sure we know, Oz has a plan with Alberto's drugs. VT as the fall guy, as he has the file on him. But these scenes certainly lead to Oz thinking more and more on his feet, which is Oz's forte. Right outside the funeral, we have a bunch of Gotham citizens protesting Sofia's release, chanting, send her back, signs saying, hang the hangman. There's even a Riddler insignia there. Initially, we see Oz want to slip the pictures to Luca of Johnny Vitti at the funeral, but he just completely ignores him. Now, when exchanging words with Sofia about Alberto's service, we get some more insight into Oz's brothers in this moment. He reveals that he didn't actually have a service for his brothers, Jack and Benny, and that's because Francis didn't want to deal with the pity. Now, I'm really hoping that we get to see this. This is something I haven't seen myself. Just want to put it out there, so no spoilers. But we did get a trailer for the weeks ahead for the Penguin series, which did tease a young Oz. So I wonder I mean, I feel like this is going to probably get pretty dark. Like, again, seeing how Francis talks to Oz in present day, I mean, are we going to get a glimpse of that when he was just a kid? Are we going to see the moments in where Oz's brothers die, like, and how they died? Were they caught up in crime from a young age? The next most interesting point is that Oz reveals that Francis, his mother, died a few years back to Sofia, which is very, very fascinating because that means, obviously, nobody knows that she's still alive, showing how precious that she is to Oz, but also, like, damn, like, could that get found out this season? And that's where I can tie in another theory here. I don't know anything about this out of the episodes I've seen, but the most obvious theory to come out of this is Francis gonna die this season? Not from dementia, but perhaps if Sofia really does learn the truth about Alberto. Despite her thinking she found the killer this episode on behalf of the Maronis, which we'll get into in just a second, if she learns that it was Oz, will she learn that Francis is still alive and she wants to take something away from Oz that he loves just as much as she loved Alberto? It seems a bit predictable, but I wouldn't be surprised if it goes that way. Next up, we see Sofia go back to the Falcone mansion, and the detective has a present for her, one of the Maronis, and it's Oswald, who got shot during the truck hit. Now, due to this, Oz gets summoned by none other than Nadia Maroni, and she's not happy, obviously. Oz should have known all of their movements. I mean, the way he sold himself to the Maronis was definitely elevated, as she said. And again, what I liked about this is that even though we've only briefly seen Nadia, you can tell she is wise and formidable, which is why I hope we do see quite a bit more of her. So Oz tells them that it must be Sofia playing her own game, and right as they're about to perhaps take Oz out, he shows them the picture of Viti, and we learn that the woman he's been sleeping with is none other than Luca Falcone's wife, and that they've been doing it for years. This is beautiful dirt on the underboss of the Falcone crime family, because now you've got Luca basically stepping in and assuming the kingpin role. Can you imagine what he'll react like if he found out that Viti was screwing his wife? That is just, yeah, gold. So Nadia ultimately says, though, that they want their man back, not only for them, but again, Oz is at risk as well, so he's quite literally put on like a freaking sand timer. We then head back to the Falcone mansion with Oz and Vic, and Oz gives him another mission, and he says that they might literally be driving to their deaths right now, and he tells Vic to look for the red Mercedes and plant the jewels from Falcone's safe in there to make it look even more convincing that Viti did all of this, right? So I felt bad for Vic in this moment, getting a bit nervous about this, to say the least. But I also love how Oz is reveling in it, trying to encourage him to use nervousness / adrenaline for excitement rather than anxiety, as people often say in real life as well. Feel alive, Vic, huh? Feel that heartbeat? And I love it. I freaking love Colin Farrell in this role. Also, how about that moment back with Sofia eating in front of everyone at the wake? All of them are whispering about how she's become unhinged. The same situation as well with that woman later with the kid who Sofia used to know. She's just like, you know what? If you think that about me, I'm just gonna lean into this even more. Screw all of you. I'll give you the beast that you want to see on the stage. Which is also yet ironic, I think, at the same time, because I think out of everything she's enduring and what she has endured at Arkham, it kind of has made her feel more and more like the thing that everybody thinks she already is, but actually perhaps never was. And so this is where Oz goes to find Oswald, and the clock is ticking as he is going to wake up very soon, and Sofia's man is ready and waiting to do a bit of torturing. So Oz thinks to go over to Viti and Milos to tell them about how Sofia's got someone down in the basement, which is just lovely shit stirring the pot, if you know what I mean, as they won't like that she's got her own game going on outside the family, and this allows Penguin to make his way to Oswald. And he was going to let him go after he would tell the name Viti to Sofia with regards to who was responsible for killing Alberto, but Vic rings Oz and tells him that he couldn't plant the jewels, so the plan has to change, which is when we see Oz kill Irvard. Now, this is the time to bring up only a couple of nitpick kind of criticisms that I have so far, and that is that it feels very obvious, and I'm saying this in, the best faith I can, despite loving this show, and it's not a major thing. This is kind of obvious since the show is called The Penguin, and we know he's gonna come out on top as Kingpin, so he's not gonna die if he's gonna be in the Batman Part 2. But plot armor is a thing you need to be careful about and still write carefully, because such as in situations that he's put himself like this, the writing does come across as pretty convenient to me. Just in the sense of how Oz snuck in there, or even if you want to put that aside after he kills Irvard and just opens the door and leaves, or even if you just consider how anyone could have walked in the room while he was in there talking to Irvard or on the phone to Vic. That could have quite literally happened at any single moment, and if it did, it would have all quite possibly been over for Oz there and then in the show. Show over, finale episode 2. You can also chuck in the mix in how Vic managed to get away with multiple men pursuing him as well, to then hiding behind a tree. And the reason why I have a little, not that I wanted him to get caught, but again, it's the way they execute these situations. But given that they know from their knowledge in the Falcone crime family that there is somebody who killed Alberto, Sofia's brought to their attention that there could be somebody on the inside who gave away the truck's route and operation that was hit by the Maronis. I don't think you would have those multiple men who went after Vic just kind of give up pursuing him for him to just kind of conveniently get away and hide behind a tree. I know not a lot of people like hearing about criticisms like this or view them as just solely nitpicks. It's just something that I noticed. I know the series has to take risks with the main character, of course, so in this situation, Oz kind of did have to go in there, but I couldn't help but think it does feel almost contrived at points in how Sofia's bodyguard just didn't kind of walk in there while he was on the phone, or even when Oz opened the door to leave, somebody could have been if he got Saw in there, it would have just been doomed, right? So I guess you could just conclude that Oz is a very lucky man. Moving on, Luca isn't happy at all that Sofia went behind his back, but kudos to Sofia Falcone. She's completely proven right in this moment when they find the body of Irvard left behind. And so Luca gets everyone who went on the drops transport gathered up. And for a moment, it really does look like Oz is about to plant the knife on Viti, but it turns out that he plants it on Sofia's bodyguard, making it look like he is secretly working for the Maronis. Now, Sofia is 100% locked in this moment, wanting to shoot him right away. Now, if I was the Falcones, even Luca, I would have wanted to take him in for questioning, learning maybe what else he could have told the Maronis, and then maybe the bodyguard would have racked his brain thinking, oh yeah, I did just kind of get bumped into by Oz, and in that scuffle, he could have planted the knife on me. Maybe you should look at him. I don't know, but if it was Sofia, I would understand the impulsiveness because she just straight up wants to kill Alberto's killer. But Luca, yeah, I guess maybe he just wants to prove that he's worthy to be the new kingpin in the crime family, since he is kind of just waltzing in and taking charge, so he just wanted to end it there and then. But as for Oz and Vic, this is when Oz decides to give him a bit of a tough love lesson. As Vic is digging the grave for Irvard and Sofia's guy, Oz tells him to lay down in the grave with them. This is all, I think, just quite a visceral reminder of what happens when you choke that Penguin wants to get across to him. As he said, dead's a one-way street, and Oz was this close to getting popped, and so he tells Vic that if he wants to survive, he's got to adapt. Think on his feet and be quick. And to be fair to Oz, he does just that himself, so Vic has a lot to learn. And as I kind of briefly teased earlier, I still think this was all out of really a bit of Oz's mother coming through Oz in this moment, if that makes sense. He still needs Vic to deliver every time, just like Oz did for Carmine back in the day. Otherwise, you end up like one of these bodies in the grave. Bottom line, tough love indeed. So from this moment on, Vic really does need to step it up a bit. But as serious as this conversation was, I still can't help but laugh when Oz is like, then I gotta plant the blade in the jaws.
A lot of work for me, Vic. A lot of work.
And then right at the end of the episode, one of the final scenes was between Sofia and Luca, and where he effectively tries to push her out, saying that she should leave Gotham, saying it's best for her and her safety. He says, didn't you spend your summers there in Lake Como, revealing that Luca was likely the one to set Sofia's cousin up on suggesting that so he could see her as a threat and an opposition to his claim to rule, but not only that, also just a bit of a thorn/hassle for him to deal with. And so this marks a turning point for Sofia, and she can now reset her sights on what her and Alberto were going to do anyway. And so that's where Oz meets with Sofia, and she reveals that the jewels were found in Castillo's apartment. It's what Alberto went to get the night he died, an investment into their future, the new drug, and that is to rule the family together. So she refuses now to be pushed aside again like she's nothing and wants Oz's help to do so. So the very ending of this episode, I think, really does mark just how all of this really is going the way Oz wants it to go. Sure, like, don't get me wrong, there are some unexpected twists and turns in his plan, but after those unexpected twists and turns, everything still is, like, heading back on the same road to the destination that he wants to achieve. So now, moving forward, it's about launching the new drug onto Gotham City's streets. And as Oz said, let's dance. I mean, think about it. The end of last week's episode, they weren't exactly at the alliance level, but now Sofia and Oz's interests are most certainly aligned with launching this new drug. Sofia wants to screw over her family. She's got to cut Oz in, but she's not aware of this other game that he's playing and how he's been playing her this whole time. So there's still a lot of things going on underneath the surface than just, oh, okay, it's interesting enough that they're going to launch this new drug on the streets, and what is this new drug? That is all very intriguing, because you can't just quite simply get a new drug and be like, hey, everyone, buy it. Like, you need to maybe think about distribution. Like, there's a lot of things that will go into Oz and Sofia's journey into making that work on top of just the drug itself. So their dynamic's going to be a whole new thing to look forward to in the next episode. But then there's still the whole strategic game of chess being played by Oz underneath. And that is something that is just potentially going to blow back in his face in the way that I've been explaining, and how you've got this plan, but there's the twists and turns that Oz has to deal with, just like in this episode, just like in last episode, and he somehow wings it out of there every time. And that's what adds these, thrilling, exciting, and unexpected moments in each episode, despite us knowing the general direction of what Oz wants to do and being in on it. You have these exciting, unforeseen scenes and parts of episodes that just like completely change up the game and force the characters to adapt. But honestly, even outside of the larger Kingpin ambitions, I'm quite looking forward to seeing Sofia's journey just continue to screw over her own family, because again, from her perspective and everything we understand already, but which you will go on to understand even more as you get into her backstory in particular, she's kind of like Oz, in where it's like a villain you maybe even like a little bit and learn to root for, despite the ruthless things that they may end up doing from time to time. But ladies and gentlemen, without me rambling too much longer, I would love to know your thoughts about episode 2, Inside Man of the Penguin series. Turns out I made another long review. Look at that. I guess I can't help it, so maybe each Penguin review is going to be this long, or longer, I don't know. But I'm dying to see what you guys have to say. There's a lot of things to talk about coming out of this episode, so let me know any theories you have, things that you're looking forward to in the next episode. But other than that, if you've made it this far in the video, would really appreciate a like. Consider subscribing with the notifications on to make sure you never miss out on a future video like this. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, fellow Bat family, in the next video. Goodbye.